All right. Good morning, folks. We are back again painting the Silent King with our makeup brush from the dollar store. So this is part 4 of our challenge. Last time we completed the Menhirs, so I have a nicer picture of them right here. You can see they turned out pretty well. Have some nice OSL lighting effects on there, as well as some nice gradients, blue to green across the stone, kind of hinting at its arcane nature. Then we finished up the bases on the bonus stream on Wednesday and got those completed. So those are ready for the tabletop. Now we're going to turn our attention to the throne. And so here's our reference. So as you can see on this reference, there are basically two different main colors on this throne. There's a kind of steel black color, which is the steps and the places that they're standing, as well as the various wires and tubes that are coming up to connect to the stone. And there are some brass pieces as far as the area around the little minarets here, or whatever these are called, these little stations where these people are sitting, or standing I should say. They have a kind of brass look to them, especially the Necron symbol in the middle, and the little legs that connect them to the standing platform. Additionally, the little spikes in the background, it's hard to see here, but behind the black stone there are these pillars that stand up, and they also are a brass color. So today what we're going to focus on is getting the throne in grayscale so that we can continue to work our dry brushing across the model. And we're going to make sure we get a base coat on these back pillars and on these other smaller pillars underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. In fact, in grayscale here on the side, you can see it really well. So this is something I do when I want to see where the light is hitting the model. I can put my model in a light box, and then I can move the source around it and figure out kind of where I want the light to come from. Then, just so I'm not distracted by whatever colors are on the model, I take the model, set it to grayscale, and then I can see all the spots that are highlighted. And that's where I'm going to focus my highlights. So there you go. That's one of the things I use to figure out where I'm going to put all of my highlights. Well, today, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I am going to mix up some Army Painter Matte Black with some Army Painter Matte White. We're going to make that dark gray mix that we put on the Menhirs in the very beginning, and we're going to get this any place on the throne that is going to ultimately be that kind of gray steel color. That gray steel, though, has kind of a tinge of green to it, and we'll fix that in a moment. But we'll first start off by getting our dark gray in. And this is really just going to be building up our layers, just like on the Menhirs. We're going to get a touch of water in there. I'm not going to use my other brush. It's just a little too aggressive. So put just a little water on the palette there. And this brush was nice and clean. I do clean it in between with our brush soap. So we'll pull this together here for a nice dark gray. Pull just a little more in, and I'm just mixing this by eye, just until I like the gray colors that I've ended up with. It's a little bit darker than 50-50. Here we go. All right. Then I'm going to come in, remove most of that. And this model here has been primed with Chaos Black. And that's what the color that's on it right now is. So we're going to start around the tops here and just get this color kind of everywhere. It's okay if we get this color on a thing that's going to eventually be a brass color. That's okay, because we're going to come back and we're going to actually base coat that in Rhinox hide. And so then we'll talk a little bit about how I do the non-metallic metals for brass and for gold. But in the beginning here, we're just going to get this kind of everywhere. And this is the tedious part, I would say. The direction also doesn't matter all that much here. In some of the previous steps for the veneers, I did talk about making sure to get everything going the right direction. It doesn't so much matter here. This is just the initial base coat here. And you can barely see that it's on there. And that is on purpose. We definitely want to very, very slowly build this, especially on such a nice model here. And this kind of showpiece model is the kind of model you do want to take your time with in this regard. Just random Space Marines, just, you know, rank and file guys. It's generally not worth it. Unless that's what you're going for. And then, of course, you know, you do you. But here, I am going to take the time to slowly build up all of this color here, just because this is such a nice big model. It's a showpiece model. It's definitely one that is going to draw the attention on the tabletop. And I want to make sure that I give it the time that's due. So we're still just slowly building up these grays here, coming in. And we're mostly just covering all the top section with this, and you can see it's darker just under there where the Chaos Black still is. But the tops here are getting this nice dry brush of this dark gray. Just continue to work our way around the model. I'm going to put my thumb on it here to stabilize. This model has a lot of kind of little finicky bits that are placed around. The stairs being one of them. They have this one attachment point. I don't know if you can see it deep down in there. There's this one little piece of plastic that is holding it in place. And it is kind of scary. It doesn't really look like it could take a lot of abuse. And so I'm trying to be as careful as I can with it. Just going around this model here, I am seeing lots and lots and lots of these orbs. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here. There's a big piece up here that has to do, there's a big orb in the back, there's a big orb under. So just as I go, I'm making note of all of these, so hopefully I don't forget any and end up having to come back to it. Alright, and you can hear that sound. It really is starting to make kind of that very tinny sound. That lets me know my paint is drying out. One of the kind of minor benefits of having the tinfoil on there to keep everything clean. I'm just going to add a couple of paint brushes here of water to it. There we go. I'm going to pull some more paint in, just to get it back to that dark gray that I want. Alright, a little more black. Alright, get that paint out. And we're going to keep going. This is really just to build that really kind of obvious contrast between the bottom of the stairs and the top. Having this really dark gray. You may not think that you can see it all that well right now, but it's going to provide us a really nice foundation to work on. It's kind of hard to show you guys what I'm doing down in here. Oh, without bonking the camera over and over again. My apologies. But I'm really just trying to get this gray all over the place. And yep, it's very subtle, but it's definitely there. You can definitely see where the gray is and where the gray is not. So I'm concentrating that right on the tops of everything. Go back for some more of it. Get that out. Come back in again. Yep, start that highlight process in here with our orbs. Oh, get my hand out of the way there. Same thing in here. I've already done these partially But now I'm gonna keep going here. Oh, I know this camera is definitely gonna have a hard time seeing this, but there really is a small but still noticeable difference in between this very dark gray and the true black that's on there. And again, it's okay if we get this on something like this. It's going to eventually be, so this piece right here will eventually be a brass color. But that's okay if we get paint on that. Go back for some more paint. It's still wet enough. You can hear it. It's not particularly scratchy sounding. All right. And this is just dry brushing. Some of these textured parts like this, I am being a little more careful with. I do want to make sure I am pulling down and not up, because I don't want paint to get on the wrong side of these things. And so in the front it didn't matter all that much, but over here in the back I do want to make sure that I am getting this paint only on the side that I want it on. And so the order does, not the order, but the direction that I am going does matter here. Otherwise what happens, we'll start to get paint under it, and then that will undo our good work here with this really dark gray, because remember, it's pretty subtle. And so we do want to get it where we want it. Not doing too much work in there, because again, that's going to be in some really dark shadows, but I do want just a hair to be on it. Otherwise, it just kind of fades into the general background of the model. You won't be able to see it very well. And so this is just adding just that touch of gray down in there, so that when it's viewed and it's dark, we'll still be able to see down into the model and still be able to get some of that detail. Alright, come back in for some more. Mix that up. Get a touch of water. Let's bring that back to a good level of moisture. And get that out of the brush. And we'll keep going. This is a fairly large model. I do have a plinth that would fit this, but I feel like on such a large model, keeping it in frame would really be difficult with a plinth as well, adding just additional height to everything. Again, pulling from the top to the bottom, even with this first coat here. Over here it mattered a little less, but here on this top section I definitely want to do that. And if you were in a hurry, or this was a smaller model that mattered a little bit less, you could definitely skip this step. You could just move on right to a little bit brighter gray, but we're probably going to have 5 or so layers in here, starting with this very dark gray, just to give us a difference between the top part and bottom part of these pieces. It's subtle, but in the end, again, because it's a showpiece, I feel like this is going to be worthwhile. Oh, hit the camera, my apologies there. I'm trying to get down into some of these little struts here. Again, this is not necessarily because there's a ton of light down here, but it's very dark inside of this model, but there's still a lot of detail, and I want to be able to see that detail. And so this very dark gray will provide just enough contrast to make that happen. Right, so I have gone around the model once here with this really dark gray. Now I'm just looking around to see if there's any other small bits that I missed or that I want to hit. I do right in here. This section here. And again, we're using this makeup brush here, so we're limited on what we could do here. Basically, this brush is good at stippling, and it's good at dry brushing. And there's essentially no other techniques that it's going to be great at. It can do some other things, but just not well. We can even kind of edge highlight if we're particularly brave. All right. Almost done. Right now I'm still just going back, looking to see any spots I might have missed. Alright. Alright, so for the first pass, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to wash out my brush here. And we're going to do a step change. We're going to move up just a tad. I am going to add just a little bit more matte black to my palette. And before I started today, I did shake all of these paint bottles. So hopefully I'll have to have a little bit less paint shaking time. And so for this one, I'm going to bring a little more white in. We don't want a huge step change, but we do want to see a noticeable difference now. So this is a pretty dark gray, really close to maybe something like an Administratum gray from Citadel, but it's still going to be dark enough to give us a nice step and not too fast. So we're going to come up here and go all over again. I'm going to give these a circular motion on the very tops of things. That way I kind of get into all the little spots, because the light's basically coming from the top down on these. So I'm not super worried about it getting into every crevice. I am avoiding kind of the inner area there. These steps do have a pattern to them. So I'm going to kind of roughly follow the pattern from the step above each step. Just getting in there, and I'm not going to go all the way under. One day I'll get a little better about touching these cameras. Gotta build the muscle memory of where they're at in space. Alright, again I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna pull down, and I'm gonna get all in here. It's hard to see, but we're just using the same dry brush technique. Starting from the top, pull into the bottom here. This one I am going to be a bit more careful, so I'm not jamming this brush all the way down in here to hit things. I'm only hitting things that, if you look right here, would be hit from the light coming down. So like right here, if you hold it directly above, say the light's coming directly from above, this is now what the light would see. So now you get a better idea of what it is you should be painting. Whoop, brush got out of my hand right there. Just escaped. Alright, so I'm going to grab a little. I can hear that it's pretty dry, so I'm going to come back in with my brush of water. And there we go. I'm going to pull some more paint in. And this is just eyeballed, but we're going to keep it the same color of gray if we can. So that's why it's nice to have some of the remaining gray around. You can just mix it until it looks like that. I'm going to get most of that out. This is kind of the biggest downside, I think, to using this technique, is that you will waste a lot of paint. You do end up taking a lot of paint out of your brush because you are, again, trying to dry brush. And so it's not that, you take it all out, but you are removing quite a bit. And so over the whole course of doing this, I imagine we're losing quite a bit of paint. In fact, just looking down, like that's so much more than you would normally see when I was normally painting. That might be what something would look like towards the end of a project after I've worked on, 20 guys or something. Alright, focus these here and there where the light would hit. And this, so we're actually coming in here too. So this little piece right here connects. I'm not really painting over here, but I am going to paint on this because I do want this to be a brass color and this to be a steel color. And this is going to help juxtapose those two colors. putting two colors right next to each other oftentimes really helps to bring out both of them. And so that's what we're doing with this steel and brass. I'm going to get in here and get some more of this. And for such a large model here, this does become a bit tedious, but it is absolutely necessary if you want the best end effect on your model. So coming in here too, both of these connectors, same thing. And now I think you really are starting to see that build up here. So going back to our reference, our grayscale reference, you can see we're starting to work our way towards that. And so this just shows how the natural light falls on it. Alright, pull some more of that in just a moment. I'll need to bring some more water into that. And we're just slowly building up. Pull this closer to the camera here. Just slowly building up. All these layers of gray. This I know is some exciting content. The slow and inevitable dry brush of the throne. I actually did poll and see if people wanted me to do some of this off camera, and ultimately the answer was no. I did poll quite a few people, and more people said they would rather see me execute these techniques, even if they weren't particularly exciting, than said they would rather me just take care of it off camera. And so that's why we are doing this today in this fashion versus me doing some of this dry brushing, because of course you've already seen quite a bit of this dry brushing off camera or on the Menhirs. This was how we built up the shadows and the highlights for those. And this is also, if you're familiar with what everyone's calling slap chop now, this is another way to build up all of those highlights for your transparent layers in your speed paints. Any of the speed paints, it doesn't really matter what brand. There's quite a few now. But this is a little bit better way than just zenithaling it, which you could do. Nothing wrong with that, but this is definitely going to give you quite a bit more detail and control over where that detail ends up. As I bonk the camera some more. It's kind of hard to keep it, such a big model here. It's hard to keep it in the frame and then not touch with the end of the brush here. In fact, one day I might remove some of that. Then it'll be a modified paintbrush. Alright, grab some more of that gray. Gotta be careful not to step it up yet. There we are. Yep, and you're seeing that really start to come to life here. Especially on these supports, because the thing here is black, but the supports now are really starting to grab a lot of that light gray color now. Just coming in here, I'm gonna grab some more. It's a little dry, so grab our brush, grab a little water, come back, and mix it in again. Things will pick up a little bit after these steps are completed, but again, they are absolutely necessary if you want the nicest transition in your colors here, which I do, because this is a really big kind of showpiece model. Might not be worth it for your rank and file, but for this, I definitely want to have some nice transitions, nice smooth transitions on these guys. Let's check into chat here. Yeah, a few people in the chat. Let's bring this up just a tad, so we'll need a little more paint. A little more black, and a little more white. Again, these were pre-mixed. Army Painter, you're always, in almost every paint, you're going to really need to get them all mixed together well. And so you'll want to either use your hand to shake the paint really well, or you'll want to get a paint shaker. The test tube shaker, which I showed off last stream, I feel is probably the best thing for that. All right. Moving that here. Now that you've seen this quite a bit, I'm just going to leave this on the table here because it's a lot easier for me to control. And I'm going to keep pulling down, adding the gray more and more. Get it all in there. Nice swirling motions on this top area, especially towards the front. Almost now it looks like a dust that's on the model, but without the texture, which is definitely the goal. This is supposed to be metal. We've already added our texture to the stone, but this metal, we would like it to be nice and smooth, which is something we really have to be careful of when dry brushing. Dry brushing tends to add a kind of matte finish to whatever it is you've done, and that's okay, but I definitely don't want it to kind of move on past the matte finish to the textured finished phase. Stairs really starting to pop out there. They are kind of the one of the main items that you're going to be looking at first. I think your eye is probably going to be immediately drawn to the guy in the middle, probably this guy, and then after that the other guy, Cesaric, who's sitting on, or standing, I should say, in front of the throne, and then probably the minions, whose names I have forgotten. I have these little gun thingies underneath. I think they're guns. I don't remember. I probably built this model a year ago when he went in the storage, because I had some other projects that needed to be finished. Alright, yep, build that up there, and just a little in there. So keeping the model on the table like this also helps me to realize where the light is falling from this perspective as I turn it. So I do have the reference up, and I am looking at it as I go. But this is definitely helpful just in real time. I'm going to grab some more. Oh, that is surprisingly still moist. That's good. And get that out from the top to the bottom. I'll leave some of that black in there. Grab that. And I am leaving these balls here. Whatever I do with this kind of dry brush would just be obliterated whenever I came back in later with the pure white that we're going to use on them, because they are part of an OSL effect. And so really all we're doing here is just building up the throne itself. And then we'll take care of our OSL effects in a later step here. Wow, it's already been 30 minutes of the dry brushing. Just making sure that felt okay. Good. Felt like I put this together fairly well at the time, but one never really knows, especially on these finicky models. That's why it's always a good idea to have some glue at the table. Alright, grab some more of this little bit lighter gray. I'm going to have to add some water the next time for sure. I'm going to come up here for this. I'm just holding this stable just so I don't accidentally break it. And so this guy is going to be lighting this area, so there is going to be a fairly strong OSL effect inside of this. But I want to make sure I get the outside too, which is not going to be part of that, save for around these other small balls. Alright, catch that edge there. You can kind of see it's really fun to watch some of these edges just pop out when you finally hit them. I'm not getting too crazy in there, it's a little darker, but the areas here along the front and back are now really starting to get some good highlights on them. Not color, but they're definitely starting to get some nice shade. Alright, as you can see here, we'll pull this reference back up again. Grayscale. There we are. And that's what we're working towards. We're just working it up there. So I'm going to wash my brush out here, and we are going to step up again. Next step up. Go ahead and remove the reference. So this time, I'm going to make sure this is fairly dry. We're going to pull a lot more white. And so we're going to be stepping up one more time here. A little more. I don't want to go too crazy. I think we want at least one more step after this. But this is a pretty significant step up here. Alright, as you'll be able to see, yeah, when I put it on the paper here, it shows up pretty well. So we'll start at the highest parts here. And this is where we're going to be a little more gentle starting in this phase. And we want to leave, so if we look at this, you can see I am leaving some right here. So I'm not trying to jam this all the way down in there. I just want to hit these spots that would make sense to have the light on them. The very tops are really good. This area right here, and then this. So this area right here underneath will be in shadow. But now for the first time, like really instantly, you can see these pieces pop out. But if we hadn't done the work ahead of time, if we hadn't put those other two layers on, this would be a really stark, it would jump out very, very well, starkly against the rest of the model, which we don't want to do here. We do want to give the illusion that this is metal and that you're really just seeing kind of shiny parts come out of it. If we went the other direction and we said, okay, we really want it to just jump out all the time, it would kind of stop looking like metal, and it would look more like a black thing that's shiny and has kind of highlights to it. Which, if that's what you're going for, that's great. But in this case, that's not what I'm going for. I do want this to start feeling a bit more like it's made of metal. I'm going to come in here, hit the undersides of this. And so for you, some of the stuff might not be necessary. Again, like, there's definitely a time and a place for all of this. And you can see now, this is matching. That is about the level that I took the previous one to when I was highlighting that out. And here's where we're just going to be real careful coming along that. Taking really light strokes here. not trying to overdo it, because this is the part where if you do overdo it, you will start to get paint places you really don't want it. I'm going to bring that out. And so there's some nice little pieces, nice little relief areas on this. And I am trying to bring that out, especially because we're going to be juxtaposed against this, which I'm actually going to go the other way on. And it's going to have a base coat of Rhinox hide. Just pulling, pulling, pulling. Oh, we can see that comes off really nice here. This is just a little wing that's shooting out. Get that there. So we'll definitely want quite a bit of paint on that. Same thing here. These will probably end up being brass as well, but for now we'll go ahead and highlight them out. That's definitely not going to hurt us later. There's little bits in there. We don't want to overdo those, but I do want to know they exist. Same thing here, we're just going to hit that. Come back for a little more. Now that's very, very dry, so I'm going to wash my brush out. Start fresh here. Pull most of the water out, but not all. I'm going to put a little water on my palette. This is just one of those things that you're always kind of fighting the paint trying to dry out, and I could use a wet palette for this as well, but this would be really difficult for me to control my moisture content with this kind of technique, and it's really important that it not be overdone here. And just get in here with that so you can see. Wait for it to focus there, because I'm really just trying to hit to the middle of these. And you can see I stop once I get that piece there that kind of wants, let's see. Can't entirely tell if it's focused or not, but this stops like halfway down. And that's definitely what I'm trying to do, is keep this particular very light, well, compared to the other gray, right on the tops of things. Coming around to this side. Same deal, mostly trying to hit the tops. Just a few little bits at the very tip tops down in there. Then, like I said before, I'm going to hit these connectors so that they jump out. And I'm going to hit the camera some, as I'm sure you folks are getting used to. Coming around, grab that and this gun thing. Then hit the camera some more. Same thing here. Pick out this gun thing and this support. Go back in for some more paint. All right. And now we're going to bring it up to here. I am just going to keep this sitting on the table just so it's stable here while I'm working on this. Now I'm really going to try and work this onto this edge here. Gotta be careful. I am putting some force on it for sure, but I'm not overdoing it. It's definitely a kind of finicky little piece right here. And that's where Sazerac is going to stand. We want to make that nice. Put a little extra paint in. Get that out. I'm going to stick towards the edges of these stairs now. You can see that edge really start to come out for me. I'm using very little paint because I don't want to overdo it. I'm pushing towards, so I'm going to go in and pull, but I have more force on the brush as I get to the edge here than I do whenever when I do that initial plunge down into the model. Because I do want the highlight to be on the edge, and I don't want to leave a little blob of paint in there. There's very, very little paint on my brush right now. All right. Yep, trying to get that edge there with very, very little paint on my brush. I'm going to come in here. Now this is very dry now, so we're going to wash the brush out. Alright, going to get a little more water on my palette. Grab some of the fresh water here, put that in. Alright, we'll mix this in here, grab a little more of that white. There we go, bring that up, nice. Alright, then get that out. Again, we're going to be a little careful here, just because we are. So that had almost too much. It was a little dangerous, but that's why I started way up here, because if you are going to have too much, it's better to have it on a place that it would make sense versus having it lower on the model like where it was. So I'm just going to continue to kind of overpaint this area until I feel like I've lost enough of the paint to where it's not scary. There we go. Just slowly building that up here. And this is kind of the main piece here that people are going to be looking at, so don't worry about that. There we go. Yep. Alright, still going on this. It's just that very, very slow build-up of paint that we're going for. And going over a part you've already done is also fine here. This just makes this color a little bit stronger, especially on the tops of all of these sections, which is what we're going for here. Now, looking at this piece that's going to be brass and looking at these stairs that have continued to have more and more highlights applied, really can see quite a big difference between this section and this other. Pulling that in just a little bit. Nothing crazy down in here because, again, we're further into the machine. Get some more paint. Come in. See these here. Same thing. Just going to come right in there and hit those. Just because we do want that to pop out a little bit. Looks like we've already done most of the other side here. It makes sense that this stuff right here would be deeper in shadow, so we have less. That right there should pop out. This should pop out. Here we are. All right. That's looking pretty good. Let's go back to our reference. Always good to take a look while we are going. So it's a little bit hard because of the direction that this is in. But I like where we're going. They definitely had a little bit darker section. So they kept it a bit darker. They didn't make nearly as many layers here. But I think they might have been going for something that wasn't quite metal or was a special type of metal. We're definitely going to be working for a kind of dark steel color. Yeah, just taking a look here. Looking around the stairs, I'm looking around the kind of little podiums that they're standing on, making sure that those kind of look the same. Yeah, we're going to keep going. Alright, now we're going to have another step change. This is going to be a fairly large step change. And what we're shooting for in the end is kind of what you see here. That was where I ended with the other one. I did that because I knew I was going to have to work the other colors around, and I did not want to have to fight it to not put color someplace that I didn't want it. Alright, here we're going to have a little less black because this is definitely going to be either our second to last or our last highlight. It really just depends. I think probably in the end our final highlight would be just a very, very small amount of pure white. But this is going to be a lot lighter gray. We're going to touch just a little bit of water down to our palette here so we have not quite so dry a paint. There we go. We do want the paint to flow into the bristles, and so if the paint's not flowing into the bristles, it pretty much just dries instantly on the surface, and then you are not really getting the paint that you want. So let's come in here. Yep, get that layered on. Yep, now I'm being very gentle now, so these brush strokes are very light. I don't want to overdo this, and I don't want to leave the brush strokes on the model either, which would be bad. I'm going to blend that just a hair right there. Got it. Same thing here. Now we're going to come in here. We're going to get this in as well. And you can see this is quite a bit lighter. This does pop out. Now it does kind of mute down just a hair once it's dried. When it's wet, that is when it's at its brightest. And this is kind of hard to get down in there, but this is still in the light. So we're going to take, normally I would take quite a bit smaller brush and work that in. But here, we do not have that luxury. Alright, I'm going to come down here. Yep, you can see that kind of brighten up. We're just going to blend that into what was already there. I'm going to come here, do the same. Grab the tops of this and the tops of this. Now, before on the veneers, the steel around that might have had, what did we do? A little bit of blue-green in there. And we're going to come back, but I would like it to be a similar material here, so we're going to be careful how far we go. But we are going to add just a touch of that green in, I think. If nothing else, it seems it would have picked that green up off of the glowing green objects here, so the OSL that's there. We're just going to go in here so we can kind of highlight some of these cool symbol things that are on the ground. Same thing in here. I'm going to grab some more of this light. So yeah, this is going to be one away from our final. I think we'll probably do one more here. Just brighten that up. I am going to put this back onto the table here to give me a little more control. Get that out. Alright, and we're sticking mostly to the edge of the stairs now. Not quite, we're going in just a little, but we're definitely not going in the way we were. A little bit of inconsistency here is also fine, as metal would definitely have some slightly brighter spots than others. Just going to get the edge of this because this is being shown out. This is at the bottom here. Come down the top of these. Alright, we're going to come to the back here, make sure these bits do have the right amount of paint from both sides. Oh, stone's in the way. There we go. Oh, bonk the camera. We're going to make sure we're getting the back end of this as well. This is kind of escaping just a little bit. That's because of where it's at. So we're going to make sure we get that brush down in there. back end of this as well. Don't want to go crazy here, but this is still an upper facing piece. I'm going to build that up. Same thing here, build this up, build that up there. And leaving the very darkest recesses black is what we actually want to do. We do want there to be that really nice comparison. And we'll need some more here. Up, that's pretty dry, so grab some more water, put a brush full of water on there, come back in, grab some more of my paint, get some of that out, and we're just finishing getting these highlights on. Come in here, just towards the edge of this. Don't want to go crazy back here. So I'm focusing this now mostly towards the tops of these. All right. Now that's coming out really well. So we'll finish in the end the highlights on this once we've established exactly where all of our OSL is, because our final white highlights really, and our final arid earth highlights, our off-white, really should be done with the knowledge of where this final OSL effect is going to be. So right now, I like where we've gotten with the steel parts of the throne. I'm going to go ahead and move forward now to these columns and these pieces here. So this is going to be where we're going to start putting on our Rhinox hide. So I'm going to wash this brush out here. Check in on chat. All right, looks like you guys are still doing all right. Alright, we're going to get some Rhinox hide. So this is a Citadel base color here. And this is going to be used on any parts of the model that are going to ultimately be brass or gold. So I'm going to grab some of that here. Put that on. Alright. A nice pile in there. I'm going to give just a little bit of water to this. Then pull that in. All right, then I'm going to wipe most of that out. All right, so I'm going to do a test here. I'll decide whether or not I really want this to be painted on and make a really strong layer, or if I want to keep this kind of metally, like dark metally look here and leave some of this black. So I'm going to start by coming in here very lightly with a relatively thin paint and then see what happens. And I think the answer is no. I think I actually do just want it painted on, and then I can work up from there. That seems fine. So I'm going to go grab some more paint, and we're going to come right in here. This is going to be a part where we're going to be very careful. Going to practice some of our good brush control in here, because we've already highlighted this other area. Now, one could make the argument that maybe I should have done it in the opposite order, and that would be fine to do that. But no matter where you go on a model this big, there's bound to be something that's either in front of or behind of something else in some small way that's difficult for you to still work on. And this is one of those. So there we go. So we got that Rhinox hide base on there. And this is the side without. And this is the side with. And so leaving some black in the deepest, darkest crevices is fine. I'm just going to be very careful not to get this anywhere we don't want it. Like, say, there. Luckily, when paint is wet, you can usually pull it off with your fingernail, like that. And we're going to get that in here. So let's pull this here. There we go. At the very bottom here, we're going to pull the Rhinox hide up, being very careful not to get this on any of the portions that we've already painted. Push right up to the edge. Use the piece itself to help you out here. So I'm using the piece to guide the brush. The brush is in constant contact with this. All right. And for a brush like this that's in such bad condition, it is going to be difficult not to show any brush strokes, because some of the little bristles are kind of crazy all over the place. And so that is going to make this a little bit more challenging, just because you have less control. You have less ability to control where those bristles go. But this is okay, because we can always come back and clean it up if we need to, just by being, you know, extra careful. And we might take some of our brush cleaner, and it's a brush cleaner conditioner, and it might help us to shape this brush down just a little more. Although, in all fairness, it is maintaining a very nice shape right there, which you can see against the white, despite being used very aggressively for a lot of dry brushing. Let's get some more Rhinox on there. Pull some more. Again, this is pre-shook. I shook all of this way before. Alright, and then we're going to put just a touch of water, because I do want it to flow well. Some water on there. I don't really want to touch this on, but there we go. Yep. We'll pull some of that water in. Yeah, there it is. It just needs just a tad. I'm going to get most of that out and come back in and grab what I need for the next one. Alright, yep, and as that's drying, I'm real happy with that, so we'll move on to the next. We'll come in here. Now when you do this, and you're going to be doing these smaller pieces here, you'll definitely want a smaller brush, because this, I can already foresee, is going to be pretty challenging to get the paint only where I want it, and not where I don't. And even here, this is getting just a little dry. Be careful of that, because I don't want to accidentally start putting a bunch of brush strokes in it. Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun getting it in there around them stairs. But here we are. Blocking the camera here. Really having the focus hard on putting the paint exactly where I want it. There we are. Come in from the other side here at the top. Yeah, this is kind of a messy way of doing it, but that's okay. You gotta do what you gotta do on something like this. Go in between those stairs. And more or less, that is it. Yeah. And like I was saying, there is a little bit of paint some places I don't want, but we'll have to come back and clean it up. Alright, pick up some more paint and get to the next one. I'm going to try and do all of these here. This paint does still have enough moisture in it to where I'm not putting a bunch of brush strokes on, which is really important, because you will see those brush strokes in the following things. Making sure my other hand is not in the way. Alright, we're going to use the piece again, coming right up to it and then pulling. Right up to it and then pulling. You can see I have so many points of contact. My pinky is on this. I'm sitting here. My other hand is really gripping the model carefully so as not to damage the other paint. But it's important to get stable here on this model, especially if you're trying not to get paint a bunch of places. Also worth noting is you shouldn't be drinking a lot of caffeine just before you start painting unless you want to be a little shaky. I've heard lots of people complain about being shaky, and I think, some people are naturally shaky, and that just is what it is. But I think many more people, including myself, get our caffeine fix, and then we go, okay, time to paint. I'm all awake now. But ultimately, there's a hard angle here. These stairs are a little closer on this side. Ultimately, though, what ends up happening is you are a little shaky from the caffeine, and then it's a little harder to get everything done and be as accurate and precise as you would like. So here, it's going to be a little weird, but we're going to pull the brush kind of sideways around these stairs. I think is kind of the only way to do that. Alright, there we go. So we got that mostly in there. Again, a smaller brush would make this quite a bit easier, but I'm working with what we got. Come in here, pick up some more Rhinox, and get the next one. And I do see that just ever so slightly. Can I get some water? I can. Look at that. Grab a little water here. Yeah, now that flows a lot better. We're going right up to the support. I'm not in love with the way this lighting is working here. I think I will put an additional ring light around this camera and then just kind of deal with that in my face. But I think for you to see this really well, that's going to be what I have to do. Just change up my angle here so I don't get this on the stairs. I'm constantly changing my grip, constantly changing my angle here so that I have the best grip I can get for what I'm trying to do, all the while making sure I avoid the wet paint on the other side of the model. I'm gonna get that in there. Can you see? Maybe. There we go. So again, I'm using the model, making sure that I use that little gap right there that they so conveniently left for me to hold the brush in place as I go around these objects. Yep. I don't want to touch that, even though I'm tempted. I can see a little place that needs some extra paint, but if I go in there right now, it'll 100% tear, because that paint is like 2/3 dry. Alright, and here is our last one, hidden way down in here. So we're going to go ahead and pull this one. The direction of this isn't hugely important, but if you can, just be in the habit of making your brush strokes all go the same way here. Especially on something like this. It's supposed to be metal and doesn't need any kind of strange hatch mark, kind of crisscrossy stuff like maybe cloth would. Maybe even something like some fur. Slide the brush around in there. It doesn't really fit. Whoop. But we're making it work. Get this down in here too. Do you have experience with different color producers? Are you talking about different paints? Different companies like Citadel, Vallejo, Kimura? Or what color producers? So yeah, if you could clarify that real quick. Just to start kind of answering, I do have experience with quite a few different paint lines here. One of the things I did when we started offering paint in the store is to use a bunch of different paint lines that I ordered from several different companies, including Amazon, and just give them a whirl, see kind of how they worked. We ultimately landed on Vallejo, Army Painter, and Citadel. Army Painter mostly because it's very accessible to new people. We can usually get it. Vallejo because I thought it was it's very nice for doing exactly this one thing where the paint's pretty thin. It has it's highly pigmented. It has low surface tension, so it does tend to flow fairly well. And so I liked it. Its downside is that you can't hardly get it in our area. Seemingly the issue is that it is delivered in Florida, and our distributors will not send from their Florida warehouse. I have to wait until it gets to Chicago. By the time it gets to Chicago, there is no more paint. All the people in the South have used it. So that is a downside for us, is just availability. And then Citadel is the most available. For the most part, you do have to worry about them changing out their formulas every now and then. They recently did this. But if we're talking about just it is most of the time available, it probably wins for being most of the time available. And I just noticed I've missed the very inside of this model here, just these little legs here. But I have used Scale 75, I have used Kimura, I have P3 over here on the wall, I have Tamiya paints over here as well. I have some of the paints for Gundam. I forget what brand that is. It might also be made by Tamiya. But yes, I have used quite a few. Part of the issue, though, is just making sure we can get them consistently in the store so that they're available to our customers as well. And that has definitely been a challenge. So hopefully that answers your question. From here, though, we are going to move on to getting these top ones. So for the most part, I've got these here done. They might need one more coat. We'll have to see. And so you can see quite a big difference there. But that's just going to be our base for our brass down here. And so I am going to do the parts of the throne in a brass color, which is going to be a bit warmer. And then we're going to make sure we have some space to make Cesaric look gold, because I would like him to be the most golden, and the two people next to him, I forget their names, his two minions that live on the throne, which are like these guys. They will then be golden, but less golden than him. Cesaric, with his welcoming hand, will be the most golden. And so we'll work on these guys in a future stream. As well as Cesaric's cloak. I'd originally planned to do some really fun stuff with this, but it will not be possible using this particular brush. So I'm still thinking on exactly the way I'd like to do this, but I have some ideas. Going back here, this just gave us just a hair to dry, just a little bit of time. We're going to work on these big uprights here. So I'm going to get some more paint. Grab some more Rhinox. This is a nice warm brown color, which is why it works really well for both gold and for brass. You'll just move over to your more warm colors for brass that have like red leather colors and browns that have orange in them. Whereas when you're doing gold, you'll move generally, and this is not always the case, but generally move to your cooler colors. You'll be picking out some kind of cooler yellows and kind of less reds. Maybe moving towards something like Flash Glitz yellow for your golds. And then in the end, for your brass colors, you might end with something like a Basculus brown with some white in it, or maybe even something like Phoenix Flames that has some more red added to get a slightly orange look. But a lot of this is going to be determined by kind of what's under it and how that's going to ultimately appear. All right, let's pick up some of this. We have plenty of moisture in it this time. Make sure not too much. And we're going to work on the uprights. So I'm going to hold this, hopefully in a way that you can see. We're going to start from the top and work our way down. Nice long strokes here for these, because I do not want to see these brush strokes when I'm done. Making sure I have enough moisture in it is the way to do that. I'm going to try and leave this piece inside of this, kind of black still. So I'm going to not push so hard there. Again, this brush right here is a little worse for wear. If you can see it, I'm going to come right up to this. I'm going to use the thing itself. Same thing here, being very careful not to push on. And now you can see just how nice that pops out, because we went right up to it. These two colors being right next to each other, it's going to be super nice. Come by. And I'm leaving that a darker color on the inside here, so I'm not pressing hard. I don't want to go all the way in. And I'm going to grab just that little bit of extra paint there. And now this has its first coat on this side at least. And I very carefully grab the inside here. That doesn't need to be perfect because that is definitely in deep shadow. But there we are. You can definitely see the difference there. Right. Paint this edge, which is pretty easy. We're going to catch the top. Don't want to forget that. We're going to come in here. This angle is really weird, so you might not be able to see it, but I am just putting color on this inside edge here. And now I'm going to hold this like this, just looking where my hand is going, because I don't want to accidentally touch some wet paint and make a mess. Now I'm going to come in like this. Alright. Should grab some more paint here. That's getting just a hair thin, but I think we'll have enough to get paint on this. Get this a little closer. Nope, I'm starting to see my brush strokes. So I'm going to grab some water here. Gonna do this pretty quick. Get a brush of water in there. Gonna grab the paint here. Get an extra brush of paint. Mix this in with our water so it's gonna go on nice and smooth, or as smooth as a brush like this can. I'm gonna remove some of that paint, grab it there, and now we're back. I'm gonna grab that thing the same way. There we are. And just like that, the brush strokes are much less noticeable. Going to come in here the same way. My goal is to leave this center portion still black. So I'm going to push, but not too hard, right around this whole area. Just on this face. There we are. All right. And now the same dealio. I'm going to do this. I'm going to see if I can't use the model the same way. Pulling the paint. Same thing here. I'm going to pull the paint. And there we are. Going right up to that edge. And so that edge, I'm going to do the bottom of this too, because it's still the same material. But this bottom edge here, or this little area that I'm painting, you can tell someone at GW had the idea that you would paint it in mind, because this nice sharp edge is perfect for guiding any kind of brush, not just this kind of strange brush, but if you had any other kind of brush you were painting this with, that would also not trivialize, but definitely make it much, much easier. And we're going to move on here to the next one. We're going to do the exact same thing. This is nice moist paint still. I'm going to pick up some more. I'm going to roll the brush as much as I can to keep the shape consistent. I'm going to get this settled in a place where you can see it well, and we're going to go from the top. I'm going to pull nice long brush strokes here, because I'm trying not to have the strokes be visible. I'm going to get into these crevices, which is fine. Grab some more paint. Make sure it's not too much. It's just a tad dry, so the next time we go over there, we are going to fix that. Same thing here, we're just using the edge of the model And it's almost like I put the brush on and I kind of turn it in. I don't really paint with it so much as I just kind of let the brush roll over the area using the edge as a guide. Same thing here, I am painting here, but once I get to this, I just kind of roll it in and being really careful with those the little hairs that are sticking out the edge of the brush. They don't look like much, but they will put paint places you do not want it quite easily. Now we're going to get this edge. Alrighty. Get under there too with what little bit of paint we have left. Alright, and now I'm going to put some more paint over here. So same deal, it is getting dry, so we're going to put a brush of water in there. Put that over to the side, grab some paint. 1 and 2. Being really careful if I can not to get too much paint down into the ferrule of this brush. It will cause this splaying of the bristles to get much, much worse. Definitely want to avoid that when we can. I think though what I'm seeing is it's just all this dry brushing really is hard on brushes, because you're taking the edge, essentially you're taking this brush and you're pushing on the bristles over and over and over again. It's kind of like if you take a knife and you take a balloon string and you pull it at an angle across the knife, like the backside of it, and it makes it curly. That's what's happening here. As I'm pushing it over the edge of these sharp edges on the model, it's making the brush curly the same way. And so it's kind of unavoidable, but at least it's only doing it from kind of the middle point. If I get stuff down in the ferrule really deep, it'll dry, expand, and then make the whole brush want to do that, which would be even worse. So that would definitely make it more difficult. And we're going to try and avoid increasing the difficulty, as I feel like we probably are about where we want with difficulty on this painting job. Alright, so now I'm just looking here to see where my fingers can go so I can paint this portion of it while still having a good grip. Alright, there we are. So we're going to come in here, get this nice and mixed up. I'm going to take some of this paint off, go back, grab a little, and we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to move over here so you can see. Of course, when you paint, and this is something you'll see on all the streamers and YouTubers and stuff, unless they have a camera somewhere off and there's kind of painting and you're seeing their whole everything. To keep everything on camera, you end up having to keep the camera in between your face and the model, which makes you then have some strange angles to paint from. You, of course, would not keep your brush so far away. The closer you can keep your arms to yourself, the closer you can keep your arms to your chest, the more power you'll have to hold everything in place and keep it steady. So right there, come in between all of that. There we go. Gonna try and get this inside edge here without touching anything else. Success. Whoop, touch the camera, so not quite a total success. That is almost too dry for me to do this on, but I'm doing it anyways. Caution to the wind. Alright, there we go. So now we have that one done as well. And you can see all the way around any place that I went right up to the edge, like here with that steel color, it really is popping out against what's going to be the brass color, which is nice. I have not decided if I'm going to use any true metallics on this. So far, the veneers were done in non-metallics, and so I feel just to keep some consistency across the model, we're going to keep to that. So instead of pulling out something that could go on here, like maybe a nice warm Retributor armor, I think we're just going to slowly build it up from our kind of red leather type colors all the way up through our kind of orangey colors to get us a nice kind of brass. And normally, to help sell this illusion that what you're looking at is copper or brass, we would put some verdigris places. This is the Silent King's throne. And so in the lore, generally Necrons have nicer bodies and nicer accoutrements if they are of higher stature. And there is no Necron of greater stature than the Silent King. So I suspect strongly that he would not allow rust to be left on his throne. So we're not going to be adding the rust there to sell the effect. But on lesser Necrons and on anything like a Canoptic unit, I would definitely be doing that if I were dealing in brass. That little bit of verdigris adds a pop of color, and it adds a point of interest. But here, I'll have to think through exactly how we want to add that. It might just be that we take a little bit more time with our non-metallics on these pieces and really try and sell it hard. Maybe have some additional references here to really get it right versus just kind of doing it from memory, which I would always recommend. If you want it to look totally correct, you would go ahead and have a nice reference here. I actually have several I really like, but they're just from Google. They're just people wearing armor that's shiny. There's people who are wearing different types of armor, from old brass, things from Athens, like Etruscans, like really old stuff, all the way up to modern day stuff that's been made of brass. So I'm just giving this just a little bit longer to dry. Now you can still see, I'm not sure if this is a 4K camera, but I'm not sure if it can really show you. There are very, very minor brush strokes that are in this. Not a lot, just a little bit. And so this is just from this brush. The paint was thinned enough, maybe not on this one, but in general it was thinned enough. It's just something that's going to happen. So we'll probably spend a little extra time in the next stream on these non-metallics here. But for now, we're still base coating. Then after base coating here, we're going to move on to putting in our whites on all of the pieces that are going to eventually have an OSL effect on it. All right, for this last piece here, well, it's not quite the last. There's still some brass stuff in here, so we'll catch those right at the end. But we're going to grab some more Rhinox hide. A couple of brushfuls here. Just touch, boop, with just a little water. Alright, we're going to wipe some of that out because it's too much paint. Grab a little bit, and off we go. I'm going to find the best place to hold this from. There might not be a best place. It might be that I'm holding it in a very strange way. I'm going to start at the bottom here because I need to get this color right up to the edge. I'm going to avoid this little round piece because this particular round piece will be another piece with OSL effect on it. So just pulling it. So it's not to say we won't get any paint on it, but I'm not totally painting over it here. Get that in the crevice. And we pulled that up. Same thing here. I'm just going to keep going. Nice thin base coat, which goes on pretty well since this was put on with a rattle can. And then I'm just going to smooth out some of these brush strokes here. Definitely don't want to see too many brush strokes on this metal. That looks pretty good. Turn this. I'm going to go for the inside piece here now. This one a little bit interesting just because of where it's at, and that is not nearly stable enough. Try here. Alright, that got it. And now I'm going to come through here. And we're going to do exactly the same thing we did on the other uprights. We're going to use the model and what their clear intentions were to really help get this in there. I'm just going to try and push the paint towards it. And that looks like, yeah, that looks like that's working pretty well. If I can get it down in there without touching the edge, that would be wonderful. That right there might be from where I put it together. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now, one place that I'm just not going to be able to get to is this gap in here between this piece and that. It literally is smaller than the head of the brush, which means I can't get it in there without getting paint all over it. Now, normally you would just use a smaller brush and push that brush in there, but in this case, I'm going to ignore it. This is going to happen on some parts of this model that are too small for me to get the brush in. I'm just not going to touch it, and I would imagine that 99% of the time, no one will notice that this is the case, that I just simply did not paint that. This is also going to be the case for you. Most of the time, if you have some small thing somewhere, people simply will not notice unless you point it out, and then they will. Alright, same thing here. Get my finger on the model in this case. I'm also having to pick the best side of the brush. There's a side of the brush that's slightly worse than the other. Alright, I'm going to be very careful not to get it on that. And then I'm just going to try and make some nice long strokes here. Some nice moist paint. And if I was using a wet palette, especially for this portion of it, I would not have to manage my paint moisture quite as hard. But in this case, because I am of course using a traditional palette, I am having to use quite a bit of management on this. Get some of that off. Come back. And I'm just pulling this over here to remove my brush strokes if I can. Alright, get the top here. Alright, we're going to hold this like this, and I'm going to slide, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to slide the brush down in here, and I'm going to catch this inner edge. Alright, and here is a sin that is worth pointing out. Right on top here, I did not actually remove a mold line. I just missed it. So we are going to remove that. It's on the very top of the model, and I'm not sure how I missed it up to this point, but it must go, which means we're going to have a slight mess over here. So get out this. Let's get out a fresh razor blade. Just going to do this with my hand here. So I'm just going to pull this. I could wait until the paint dries, but we are on stream, so might as well do something slightly dangerous by pushing this towards my hand. I'm going to get that off. And we'll come back the other way. Alright, that's nice and smooth. We did that with a fresh razor blade, so it was the least amount of painful. But no way I could leave that. While I'm at it, I'm going to check the rest of the tops here. That's something that anyone really can do, is check your mold lines, check your points where they were attached to the sprue. Make sure you don't see a bunch of that, or any at all if you can help it. That's one of the things that really, I think, separates kind of newer painters from the more advanced painters, where you start seeing mold lines and things. You don't want to see that on your model. It really, I think, detracts from selling your model as, you know, a little tiny real thing that's somewhere. Alright, now that will absolutely, because it's not black anymore, that will absolutely take at least 2 or 3 coats, and we're just going to put one thin coat on there, and I'm just going to keep coming back to it, possibly even off camera. I'll keep adding coats to the top of this until this looks like the rest of it. But here we are. Currently, we have our base coats on all of our brass pieces that are big. We're going to come back and take care of these small pieces in here in just a second. And we have our initial highlights with, I believe, 5 layers added to the throne itself. Alright, so cleaning out the brush here, I really only want paint on just the absolute tip here of this, and this is a moment where we are going to stipple. So, bring this to you. I'm going to very slowly, very carefully stipple this paint onto this rail, because trying to paint with it, I think, would not work out so great. I'm going to turn the brush. Remember, there's only paint on just the barest tip there, and so that's going to help us get paint exactly where we want it. So, same thing over here. Just the very end of this brush has paint on it. Get this a little closer to you so you can see. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to stipple just until it does what I want. I want just enough paint off here. Being very careful. If it gets on the inside of this column, that's one thing. But if it gets on the outside, that's quite another. And we do not want that. Oop, as I bonk all the cameras. Alright, so we have that here. I check my reference. I don't remember if these little wings are also brass, so let's go ahead and pull him up. There's our king. It looks like the answer is no, although this is all that's visible. Just a very, very small amount is visible. I think I am going to choose to not put brass, let me pull him down, to not put brass here, which is, it quite possibly could have it, but I'm going to stick with these portions I can very clearly see. Also, it'd be really, really hard to get the brush in there. So we're going to stipple this in too. Same dealio. I put paint just on the very edge of the brush. We're going to stipple it in here, doing our best not to get paint any place it shouldn't go. Alright. Check our reference one more time. I don't remember if the inside of this thing is brass. Kinda. So we'll hit this up, but not the black. So I'm being very, very, very light. Just so that I touch the symbols. Actually, these are 2 different symbols. That's kind of cool. Didn't realize it. It's probably the original dynasties these other 2 minions were from before they kind of got attached to this machine. We're going to come in here and just stipple the side here of this. Again, this won't be perfect just because the brush is going to hold us back here, but there's no reason not to get it the best we can. Same thing here. Since I've already got this side, I'll go ahead and stipple that in. So this, of course, is going to add just a little bit of texture, but on something this small, I'm not particularly worried about it. Same thing here. We're going to get this turned. And we're going to stipple that in there. Now let's see what the back of these things look like. They are almost entirely not visible. Especially when there's going to be a guy standing there. I don't mind painting the bottom of these normally, because I'm not worried about touching the railing. I think just, I'm going to try and catch the tops of this here. And maybe the very, the top. So that's what I'm going to do in here. I'm not going to bother painting the back of them because the people are leaning against them. It's going to be very difficult to actually see these. So I'm just going to paint the very tops with just a little bit of a dry brush. And the rest of that we'll leave to the imagination. And I'm just going to barely touch this because I can tell in the symbols actually have been painted up as brass, but they left the background as black in our reference here. You can see inside of those little things. So we'll go ahead and pull that back. And that's why I'm just barely dry brushing. I over dry brushed there too, but that's okay. If we need to, we can clean this up with some Nuln Oil. Just to put it down in there, and that'll dull all that down. It'll be very difficult to tell I messed up. A few little mess ups here, a few little mess ups there. It's going to be a little harder to clean up, but we'll be able to do it with a gray, a dark gray. That'll obliterate some of our highlights, but that's okay. All of it doesn't have to be perfectly highlighted. I think for the most part, it's such a large model with so much to look at, people will get the gist. And again, there's all that don't let perfect get in the way of good enough. And that's definitely where we would be if we started messing around with that too much. Alright, so now we really do have our base coats for our throne, for the metal that's going to be across the whole throne, and for our brass pieces. So now let's check and see. Again, we'll look at our reference. Where is going to be our orbs? So here for sure, there maybe. I can't quite see the ones in the back. So on the podiums at the edge next to his cloak, there definitely is one. Inside of it, there definitely is. The ball just below the big guy definitely has it. Yeah. Alright. Well, we'll start that. And for this, we are going to use a wet palette, because where in many cases you can get away with this, and this is fine, you're just going to have to manage your water really well. White is really rough. It will show, especially on something that's supposed to be very round, it'll definitely show the texture. So we're going to switch over here to our wet palette. This happens to be an Army Painter wet palette, but it doesn't really matter. You can make your own wet palette out of a plate, some wax paper, and some paper towel. You just put your plate down, you put 3 or 4 layers of paper towel, you put your parchment paper, not wax paper, but your parchment paper on top of it, and then you just add water, and not to the top of it, but to the side, and then that paper will actually help keep everything wet. So you can definitely make it yourself. This one, though, is from Army Painter. And we're going to grab some pure white here. I'm not going to add anything to it, because these are going to be the center of our OSL pieces. Now, I'm going to really make sure this brush is clean, because I would hate to have a nice white color and then some brown streaks or some black streaks or some gray streaks in it, because I didn't do quite a good enough job. And so normally, if I were just here, I would oftentimes take my brush cleaner. So I would take our Winsor & Newton brush cleaner and Restore, and I would put it in that, let it sit for just a second. I would wipe all that out, put it back in water, and then I would bring it up with some of this, which one is this one? The Masters brush cleaner, which is really good. This is also a conditioner for your brush, and it really helps when you're beating the brush to death here. And so in between filming, I definitely do this, but as is, we're going to press on unless it gets just completely unworkable. And we're getting close. We're getting close. You can see how much of those bristles are hanging off the side. We might have to take a moment to fix that, but for now, let's press on and see where we can get. So I'm going to grab some of this. It's already got moisture added to it by the palette underneath. I just want the top 2/3 of this brush to have it. And now we're going to come in and we're going to pick one place to start. For this, I believe I'm going to start on this larger ball in the center and on the top. So What this will allow me to do is set this on the table here. Hopefully get it to a point where it feels like it's focusing. Maybe. Is that where it's focused? This appears to have focused. Let's try that. There we go. All right. Make sure we have our paint here, and now we're gonna start painting this guy. And our pure white, I'm gonna come down. I'm gonna try and keep his features here though. So I'm not gonna press this paint all the way in, but since he is kind of glowing, that's very nice. So he just kind of pops out now. I'm going to put my hand on this to stabilize it. It is moving around quite a bit. And you just go from top to bottom on this. And then to get the bottom part of this, we will have to turn it. And that is okay. We're being really careful. So we can always add more paint later. That's something to remember. You can always add more, but it becomes pretty difficult to take the paint off. And so we'll definitely be going over this. And the technique I'm using for this is a bit more of a dry brush here, even though it's white. And so it could punish with some texture here. But I think being able to maintain some of these shadows in here, even after we come in with our Tezzeret glow, same thing we did with the Menhirs, I think that's going to make this worthwhile. Even if we do happen to add a small amount of texture while we're doing this. And I'm just trying to move this around a bit. We will keep the tops of this brighter than the other, but now I'm just trying to get a layer on as I bonk the camera a bit, turning this to get in. Yep, this has to be kind of everywhere, and we do definitely see some brush strokes in this. That is just, I believe, going to be kind of unavoidable here. Very gently get that in there, and we're going to want to make sure this is totally dry. So after this first layer goes in, especially on this piece, we're going to keep on moving around the model here. We're going to grab this and we're going to go in nice and bright here with this orb. Make sure you can see here. Yep. Being very careful. This is one we can let the brush kind of work its way around. It'll add a little bit of texture, but that's okay. We are stuck with this brush and what it's capable of, and so as long as those little kind of stray bristles don't touch the edge of the model, this is going to be our best way of getting into the deeper recesses around these balls that are kind of stuck down in places. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to hold it, being very careful not to mess up my paint. Same thing here. And this is just where it's going to require a little bit of patience to roll this brush all around here while avoiding our stray hairs. So you can see I'm just placing the brush in, and I'm just having to say, well, it's going to have the texture. There's nothing I can do about that. I can kind of, you know, not do it unnecessarily, but avoiding it entirely is just going to be impossible. All right, same dealio. I'm going to come in this way. And we're just going to let this brush flow around and pull this up here again. So I'm kind of pushing into the center of the brush, letting the bristles spread, and then I'm turning it. And that is how I'm getting down in there all the way around the recesses, but without touching the actual sides here. And this is going to definitely need multiple coats. So whenever we're dealing with white, you should always be ready to buckle in, because you're going to definitely need to do thin layers, multiple thin layers, so as not to create a ton of texture on your model, places that you're definitely not going to want it. I'm going to turn this that way, and then just turn and hope. We're in that hope phase too. There we go. And then these are pretty thin layers of paint, so they dry pretty quickly. So I can just come in here for some additional color buildup on our model. Hit that for the first time. We're going to come down because this, what I'm painting right now, has actually dried. So you can tell because I'm not pulling any paint off. If I was, I would immediately stop, because that would be bad. I'm going to blend that little bit right there where we kind of got a little overzealous. Pushed a little too hard. Same thing here. I'm going to grab some more paint, I'm going to pull some of it off, and we're going to come and paint bravely right on his face where we have already put some stuff. Same thing here. I'm going to get that in there nice and bright. Have some nice bright abs here. We do want the tops and bottoms of this lightning, but just like on the Meniers, I do want the tops to be brighter. Oh, I am way off here. Let's bring this back over here. I do want the tops to be brighter here. Alright, and as you can see here, we've gotten this ball. This is also dry because it is such a thin coat, so we're going to put another coat on the outside of this. And this kind of works because we're building it brighter towards the center and towards the top, just like we did. Now there's going to be texture on these. Again, nothing we can do, not with a brush like this. So we'll just have to live with this texture. Make sure we get nice and bright here. Same thing there. We can definitely help it by adding some thin layers to it. You know, if you're trying to cover up some white that's had too thick a paint added, adding more white is usually not the best idea. Just adding more paint tends to just make it thicker. But adding some more thin, especially if you're still trying to cover up, is going to be okay. Here I'm just trying to hide some of my brush strokes and make that a bit smoother. There we go. So dry brushing and stippling here has gotten him about where we want it to be. It really wants to focus on that keyboard. Really, the camera just loves it. Let's see if we can do a little better here. Yeah. There we are. And so we have our darker areas in here. Have all of our OSL coming in a second. But this is our source itself. One of them anyways. There's going to be a few on this model. Let's see. It looks like we have about 15 minutes left. So we're going to go ahead and keep working on our light sources. Now I am going to come back to this guy. He is not complete, but that is a good first layer on him for the lightning. And then once we've completed him entirely, we'll come in and we'll add some of the glow around. But for that, we're going to end up with Arid Earth because we want to keep it a little bit less intense than our actual source. So I'm going to grab some of this white, which is on our wet palette, so I don't need to manage it nearly as hard as the other. And then we're going to come in here, and we're going to start getting white on this ball. And this is going to go right to the edge here the best we can. Again, when you're doing this, you would use a very small, well, not a super small, but a more precise brush. This is actually what's getting this brush. It's not that it's not small enough. It's not that it's not small enough. It's that it's not precise enough. It's that the end of this brush is just kind of this huge honking thing. And so trying to get it places, trying to be subtle with stuff that especially is not very large becomes quite a challenge. And so I'm forced to kind of push paint around and move things places where I wouldn't normally be doing it. Alright, we kind of got that stippled in. Now, if I'm forced to add texture, at least it's going to be on my terms. I'm going to try and add it around the top area a little more. Yep, you can see. I'm just going to snake this in here. Let's see if I can't hit that area. Same thing here. And this is just me trying to, I'm going to pull as much of that as I can off. So I just accidentally ran the brush into the model. That's okay. We're going to get some clean water. We're going to come right in here, and we're going to add water to it here. And so this should come right off, and it does. And so I'm going to grab it all up. And that happened super quick. And I was able to use a clean brush, which you should always have kind of laying around, and pull it right off. So crisis averted there. You don't have to repaint anything. Let me get this piece in. And we just tap it right there. Oh, and look, happened again. So, same deal. We're going to pull it off with our hand, which that almost fixed all of it. Grab some clean water, have clean water on our brush. Add that in here. And there we go. As I go for pieces that are further and further in, I suspect this will happen a bit more. But yeah, you'd never know now that that is where that touched. All right, so that is in there. Let's go ahead and get this white out of here. We don't want the white to really dry in here because that's just going to make the bristles stiffer, and it will make it even harder to hide the brush strokes, which we don't want. All right, let's add just actually no, that looks like plenty. I'm going to add any more white here. So grab this, trying to keep it to the 2/3 on the bottom there. And now we're going to do some of these. These are going to be a little iffy. So we're going to come in, and we're going to actually use a stipple pattern here on these, because there's no way to avoid getting this on the surrounding area. But at least this way, when we're up in there, it will have a little bit more of a natural OSL effect. Get that glow coming off. Whereas if I just kind of like brush it in, it's gonna not quite do what we want. I want that to be, yeah, just a little more subtle. Not totally cover everything. There we go. I don't want that along the outside there. Yep, pull that right off. And we're just getting a few little bits in here. Doing a little stipple, clean that up on the outside, just with my finger. Nice and easy. All right, there we go. That's the first there, and we'll keep stippling in more color to the center of this. And now we have one that's going to be a little bit more of a pain, which is kind of deep down in here. but we're going to use the same stipple effect on this that we just did those others. And so that's going to add just a little bit of a glow around. And just like the other, I'm going to come in here with my finger and remove it from the outer edge. I don't want it to have the effect of highlighting the outside because that's not where this effect is located. It's on the inside. So it wouldn't make sense for it to be lighting the outside of the object, not unless there was another light source. All right, we're just going to stipple that all in there. Same thing here. I'm going to pull this off the outside there with my fingernail. Now we have those light sources there. And I have one last one here, which we're just going to stipple into. So it's that part that I told you I was avoiding. So we're going to put that in. We're just being very careful to stipple this. And then we can mostly avoid the area around it for now. So we put paint right on the outside, and we're going to catch this one too. Same dealio. It's okay if we get a little over, because we're going to come back and we're going to make a glow effect around these anyways. We just want to avoid crazy amounts of paint. Same thing there, and same thing here. And there we go. That's just by putting paint on the very end of the brush here, even though it is a weird shape. So let's take an additional look here as I move the keyboard. I have about 5 minutes, so we'll go over our guy one more time. Then, off camera, just so that we don't take forever on this thing, I'm going to come through and I'm just going to make these a little more intense by adding 1 or 2 more layers of white to it. So it'll be closer to this guy. But I'm not going to add any of the glow. I'm just going to intensify what's already there, like what you've already seen. So I'm not going to add any of the glow until our next stream. So next stream is probably going to be Wednesday at 10 a.m. going again till 12. But let's go ahead and grab some white while we still have some time and come right back in here on these. Just increase that again. We'll start on this side and work our way across. Often a good idea to have a plan. We're just trying to get paint, in this case, on the upmost areas. Getting a lot of that out coming in here. It's just there's no way to help the texture here, but by kind of doing it in a controlled manner, it can happen mostly on my terms. And, whoop, I'm totally in the way of the camera. I'll eventually get better. Just take some time. Push some paint under there. With our sad, sad paintbrush. Really want to make sure his face is shown well. Get that very nice, and we'll come back here on his shoulder and on this lightning. The area under the neck, though, is going to be not as bright. I do know he is supposed to be generating the light source, but I do think this adds some visual interest, even at the expense of it maybe being slightly less realistic in kind of the most basic sense of it. Alright, grab some white, and we're going to come back to this ball on the outside here. I'm going to focus mostly on the top 2/3 of this. Again, always trying to think how I can make my life easier later. If I didn't have good coverage towards the bottom, I would probably work some more paint in there, but it's reasonable coverage, and I do definitely want that to be darker down there. I do not want bubbles, though. Another unfortunate downside of a brush like this is it's kind of wild, and it can definitely start adding bubbles to what it is you're looking at. Come over here, make that more intense. Make that more intense. Make this one more intense. And this one, focusing mostly right on the tops. Alrighty, got that. And it looks like I really won't have to do much, if anything, in between. And so you can see I got that first layer of white on. And now I'm working on getting the second layer in, and that's just going to go right in the middle of these. And you can see that the thing I did the first time is a lot less intense, and the thing I'm doing now is much more intense. And that's really going to help to sell that the thing in the center is my light source. Same thing here. I'm going to make sure I get white paint now just on that. Same dealio, just on that big center ball, even if I don't get it all this time. That's totally fine. All right. So, what have we not put white paint on that we have to? The lightning. The lightning all at the bottom. But that's okay. In between shoots here, I am going to take care of the lightning here because it is 12 o'clock. So just like you've seen on the rest of this model, I'll paint it probably 3 times. I'll come back here and add just a little bit more white right to the center of all these pieces. And then we'll come back for the next time. So join me again on Wednesday, 10 a.m. for another 2 hours of painting the Silent King with this Wet n Wild brush here. I will see you then. Have a great day.